exempt versus non-exempt status. And so Karen Ross is with us, and she's kind of our HR expert and leads our HR team. And Karen, thanks for being here. And I want to make sure that they understand, like, what are they exempt from? I don't understand that. I mean, I hear overtime, I hear exempt. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Sure. So this comes up quite a bit where we look at positions in a company or roles in a company, and someone will say, well, this person is exempt because I'm paying them a salary.
Right.
Well, that's not really accurate. It's not what you pay them. You can pay people hourly or you can pay them by salary. That's how you choose to pay someone. But that's not how you determine whether or not someone is exempt or non-exempt from overtime. This all falls under a law called the Fair Labor Standards Act. And anyone who is in a business, commercial interstate business, basically all businesses, follows the Fair Labor Standards
Act. If I have one employee,
you still have
or if I have 10,000 employees, I follow the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because I know there's some things that I don't have to follow if I'm, say, less than 50 employees, but this is not one of them.
That is correct.
So every business that's hearing us right now needs to hear this.
That's correct. And so in order to determine really whether or not someone is exempt or non-exempt from overtime.
Which basically you're saying exempt from being paid overtime.
That's correct.
So basically they're saying everybody needs to be able to be paid overtime if they work overtime hours. That's given, and working overtime, just so that you know, the definition is working over 40 hours in a work week. And you can define that work week Sunday to Saturday night or, you know, whatever you define it, but it's working over 40 in a work week. Not like you can work less one week and more the next week and then not pay overtime. It's not in a month or whatever, it's in a work week.
Or in a day, for example. So if somebody works 10 hours one day, it's not the day, it's based on the work week,
being a 40-hour work week. So again, and this is exempt from giving overtime. So you say everybody should get overtime pay except for the people that are granted an exemption from overtime. And that's why we call it exempt. So basically the government says that these certain groups of employees you are not required to pay overtime to, and you're exempt from that requirement. So that's kind of how it all came up.
That is correct. And so under the Fair Labor Standards Act, there are very specific exemptions to determine that somebody is exempt from being paid overtime. And those exemptions, I'm just going to give you an example of all of them. There's an administrative exemption. There is the professional exemption. There is an exemption for outside salespeople. There's an exemption for professional, computer employees, and executives. So there's several specific exemptions, and I will tell you that, and we'll provide the link. There's some really good detail for each of these that you can look at. That's provided by the Department of Labor to really help you figure out whether or not someone meets the exemption. You know, they give examples of different jobs, but it's really based not on the job title, not even just looking at a job description, but really looking at the role using things like independent judgment. Are you supervising people? Do you have some specific degrees or skills? So there's a lot of good detail when you look at these links to determine if someone truly is exempt from being paid overtime.
Got it. So with this new law that may be passed, a new minimum for salary, tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about what that means. Has it been passed yet? Do we think it's going to pass?
So there's proposed regulation, and there's probably a good chance of it being passed sometime in 2024.
I think this thing that I've been reading lately is
April. Yeah, that's the date they're talking about, proposing to pass this. And so what they're looking at is, again, when you look at these exemptions that I mentioned, there's also what we call a salary basis test, meaning that someone's got to be at a certain salary level for all of these exemptions. And so right now, that salary basis is about $35,000. And they're looking at taking that in this new regulation to $55,000.
Yeah, that's a big raise, 55%. That's quite a correction.
It is. So that's huge. So we're just trying to kind of give you a heads up that it
What's
was.
that kind of mean though? What does the employee need to make, if it's, so you don't have to look at any of the factors if the person makes right now below $35,000.
That's correct. They would not be considered exempt.
Right, because none of these, whether they're sales or professional or computer, if it's under $35,000, you can just guarantee that they are not exempt from overtime, and we have to pay them overtime when they work it.
That's correct.
And so what they're saying is that we might increase that to $55,000. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to look at all the other factors, but if somebody makes less than $55,000 now under the new proposed rule, it would absolutely have to get overtime.
That's correct.
Yeah. So again, you could have a group of employees now that
Between the 35 and the 55.
yes,
And yeah,
that you might have to make some decisions on. And again, if it's one or two employees, it probably won't financially kill you. If it's a ton of employees, then you might need to look at some strategy, which is why we're talking about this now and not in April. Because in April, oftentimes the government gives you like a week to put this into place. And so we want you to really look at those things. So we really feel like one of the things you should do is, what employees are you considering exempt or non-exempt? And are we making sure that they really meet the factors, meet the criteria? And if that number increases by 55%,
what would happen?
who are those people that are caught in the middle?
Correct.
And there's some ways to correct that. I mean, you could increase their pay. You could make sure that you don't have to require everybody to work overtime, right? You could tell people you're not allowed to work overtime unless you get prior authorization from us. So again, this is overtime pay. So if you don't allow overtime, then this really is a non-financial issue for you. But if you require a lot of overtime from your employees and you're not paying them overtime, then it could really financially hurt you. And so you've got to figure out some things you can do.
Exactly. So again, we're looking potentially at April. So it's a good time, again, just to look at how you classify your employees. And please feel free to reach out to us, because we deal with this quite a bit with clients and prospects. And we're happy to walk you through all of these, or to help in any way that we can.
Yeah, and this is just one thing we do look at in our HR audit. We have an HR audit product that looks at about 14 points of HR, from HR compliance issues, which this falls under, to day-to-day HR, to strategic HR, and why do I have such a high attrition rate, those kind of things. So we look at all those things. We come out and we spend a couple of hours with you really talking about all of your HR. And so this is just one of those things that we look at. So it's a pretty affordable way for you to look at all of your human resources practices and see if there's any one that you are particularly exposed with, or any way that we could tweak some things so that you would be, better to be able to be a better employer for your people. So anyway, if we can ever help you with an HR audit, or if we can answer any one-off questions on this, we know that it's difficult. Sometimes Karen and I have to put our heads together just to figure out what we would say to somebody, because again, the stuff isn't very clear to us, and we've both been in this business a bit. So again, please reach out. We'd love to have you. Thanks again for listening to our podcast. Make sure that you like us and like the podcast, and connect with us anyway on our website or any other way. Thanks again, and have a great day.